Welcome back to the Bees Like That podcast. As always, I'm your host Chris. I want to point something out. So, I did make, allergies. I'm feeling better. My allergies are still kicking. Anyway, so I did make or film an episode on the last day of Black History Month. I'm on the fence whether or not I want to put it out. I was a little emotional and frankly struggled a little bit due to the heavy state of emotions I was feeling. I struggled a little bit with word retrieval and with kind of putting a finer tip on my points. So, not that any of that I feel like is a mistake, or that any of those feelings are invalid, or that I don't want any of you to witness me being emotional. I feel like you get to see me be pretty emotional most of the time anyway. But as I've said before, I do want to do my best to give you the best of myself, and in doing that, the best content that I can produce at the same time, right? So, I am sometimes a bit more selective with what I choose to upload to the platform. One of the things I want to talk about today. I am following some guidance from people that I have a degree of respect for. So I hear the guidance, although internally I do not connect with it entirely, right? And I'll tell you why. I believe in my heart that it is a function of privilege and dominant culture to dictate terms on how messages are delivered, right, to them, how they want to be received by people like me, marginalized populations, people of color, minority groups, etc. The reason why I have a problem with this doesn't have anything to do with the humanity of it, or with the fact that I don't think that human beings, have any right to have things presented to them with any thought or care or with a delicate nature. It's not that at all. The problem for me is, speaking for myself, because I can do that with 100% accuracy, but I do want you to know, highlight this and note it, that my experience is not unique. I'm not a unicorn in this, right? So just remember that. But speaking from my own experience in my life, from dominant culture, I'm talking about white predominant culture. It has not been, the lessons that I've learned, there's not been a ton of care or thought placed on securing first my feelings, right? And consideration of the impact of a given delivery method or the message itself. The feeling, as I understand it and have been able to interpret it with my skills, is this is what it is. You have a couple of options. You can accept it, but there's not a whole lot you can do about it. That has been a majority of my experience, particularly regarding the harder lessons that I've had to learn in life. There's definitely been an expectation to either grab bootstraps, and if I didn't have any, fashion some, get them attached, and get to work. Right? Because there's no time for your feelings right now. This is not an exhaustive list of reasons why, but that is one of the biggest obstacles for me. When we're talking about now, today, me entering spaces as the first and only in delivering messages of equality and equity, challenging unchecked and unchallenged, and I'm talking about layers of unchallenged and unchecked privilege. I have a feeling and a belief that the learning curve for those experiencing this with me on the other side is steep. And the one of few, because I don't want to limit myself here by way of options, but the one of few things that I believe will stunt or lessen the precipitous nature of this learning curve would be genuine willingness, right? However, I value the guidance of people that I respect and acknowledge that it is a possibility that there are things that they see that I may not see. Given there's also a possibility that there's a degree of growth between me, the current me, and the things that they see that I do not. So that is why I'm going to do my best to present this in a way, this first message at least, well, both of them, that is not contrary, but perhaps a bit more delicate with regard to delivery. Because it is true that I believe these messages to be of a level of importance, and I would hate for anyone to be turned away or to have missed the overall point or message because their sensibilities were disagreeable with the delivery system, right? That would be unfortunate. However, no, I'm not even going to say it. So let's proceed. And I would clear something up as well. When I speak about lived experience and the intrinsic value only found by being tested by the fires of these experiences, I mean to say that I myself will never advise or presume the ability or knowledge needed to guide someone through a thing or things that I've not experienced. I think that is dangerous. I think it's a mistake, and I think it's incredibly presumptuous. And also, it is a function of privilege. We're going to continue to circle back to that because something that I am committed to doing is highlighting this stuff for people. Since it has such an impact on my life, it's going to impact yours now too. The reason why I say this is there's something deeply intimate that can only be understood by, losing it all, right? Losing control of your body in real time and watching it respond to stimulus in scary and unusual ways. If you've gone through withdrawal, you know what I mean? Like, no matter what you do, how hard you concentrate, it refuses to listen. Your body's not going to, the regular fundamental stuff, like you'll still be able to walk. That will feel hardly controllable. You'll feel horribly unsteady, but you will continue to shake, release your bowels at will and not yours, the will of your body. When it's ready to pee, it's ready to pee. When it's ready to poop, it's going to poop. And it doesn't care if you're in a room full of people. It doesn't care if you're laying in bed. It doesn't care if you've just showered. and you're sitting in clean clothes on your furniture, it doesn't matter. It's coming. And to top it all off, it will seize and contract violently at will. What I'm talking about is seizures brought on from alcohol withdrawal, from the physical dependence of alcohol. I've gone through this not more times than I can count, because I could count that high, but it's up there. It's up there. I think that in regard to that experience, I'm breathing some pretty rare air. And that's not a flex, that's just reality. Now, if these things aren't bizarre enough, the waking dreams, or what we refer to as hallucinations, audio and visual distortions, battling in your mind, because where does reality take place? It takes place inside the walls of your skull, right? Inside your mind. That's where reality takes place. It doesn't take place anywhere else out here. The only place we can interpret the information from the outside world is in our brains. So, dreams are real. Ideas are real. Hallucinations are real. These things are taking place in your brain. And if you experience these distortions on the level that I do, they will leave you reeling and soaked in fear. It's a wild ride. Wild ride. If you've never experienced pain from addiction on this level, the level that I'm talking about, your training is just that. It's just training. It's academic in nature, and you are and will always be merely an observer, forever adjacent to the experience. You cannot understand what it is like. It is impossible. There's no way you will ever know. And I know that's hard for some of you out there. This is your identity. You are the savior. People prop you up and have done so for years. Everything you do is noble and righteous, and you are known by your community to go to the ends of the earth for people. Well, none of that factors into what we're talking about. You are still on the outside. And as hard as that is to reconcile, you got to find a way. You really do. Another point that should be understood, and this is in the realm of experience, however, not related to addiction. And I was asked yesterday by a colleague that in 2024, are we still having these conversations? And unfortunately, yeah, it needs to be repeated and reviewed. And if you are a person who is like me, you feel like you're shouting into a void filled with swamp fans on a hamster wheel, because the conversations never change. They never, ever change. When you find yourself in a position where you're being called forward to either examine your privilege or be accountable for your actions or behaviors that cause harm, whether or not they were intentional, the point is that they cause harm, and we need to talk about how we're going to remedy this and move forward. You might, and I see it all the time, you're going to experience a very visceral, instinctual, deep desire to relate. Usually this comes in the way of sharing your own experience of oppression or forms of marginalization that you feel have existed in your life and experience. And this is possibly true. In this circumstance, however, it is important to remember the differences between racial prejudice, racism, oppression, and being judged harshly for your chosen appearance. Now, we're just talking about these things inside of these parameters. We can, if we need to, fold in liberty and choice and freedom and all of that stuff because they are a part of this. But I feel like for simplicity and efficiency's sake, we can all agree and acknowledge these things without having to have these separate conversations. I can't choose a different shade of skin. I can't, before I walk into a room, make my nose smaller. I can't, before I walk into a room, change the texture of my hair. My African features are permanent. They're coded in my DNA. I don't choose these parts of my physical presentation to the world. This is what I got. The experience of my ancestors in this country over the last 500 years cannot be equally compared on any level to any group or subsection, this is an important part to listen to, of dominant culture, not today, not ever. I say this with the utmost sincerity and with the goal of progress and equality in mind and understanding, real understanding in mind. I encourage you to resist that desire to relate by comparison of trauma. It is not the same. When you feel that urge coming up, I want that to be your internal monologue, just to yourself over and over. It's not the same thing. It's not the same thing. I'm not going to say it. You got to stop doing it. Again, this is yet another function of privilege. To level these comparisons as though there can be an understanding had due to the close nature of these experiences. As I said, this is wildly inaccurate. They are not the same. They won't be, no matter how real and painful they are to you. There are vast distances, leagues of distance between these experiences. They will not be the same today, nor have they ever been, nor will they ever be. It's just the plain and simple truth of it. I bring these two things up often because they're conversations based on experiences that I run into daily. So if there are things that I run into daily, so are you. There should be an understanding that, and a desire to have this. There should be an understanding that people like me, who look like me, who aggressively think more and more progressively, even than I do, I am a notification of more of us to come. The fortunate thing in it here is they don't have to look like me. A lot of them will. They have to, but they don't all have to look like me. It's encouraging to know that the space filled by this type of human being can be filled by anyone. Now, it's important to remember that once you've been called forward, there are things here not for credit's sake alone. But if the goal is to continue to keep privilege checked and accountable, it's got to be all the way down the line. So if you've been called forward and now you're stepping to the plate, it's important that you acknowledge publicly how you've come here. You don't even have to say by who, but you should do that. Because if you don't, when you don't, what you're doing is you're delivering a message and an idea that this is an original thought and idea of your own, that you've come to this conclusion on your own, decided to be a part of, and not set aside and sit idly by, when part of that is true. This is, again, another function of privilege, right? I don't have to. It's important to say how we get to the table because it matters how you get here. You cannot sell a version of ourselves. We cannot sell a version of ourselves that isn't 100% accurate, right? If you were called forward, don't put this out like this is something that you had an idea that God put on your heart to do on your own, because we know that's not true. Because what will happen is if people like I'm aware, it will be called out. And it won't be called out one-on-one. You don't get that. You don't have that expectation to privacy and anonymity in that way. Not regarding these issues. So, to avoid adding a little embarrassment in some humble pie on top of the experience, let's just be transparent. That's all the brother's asking. That's all the brother's asking. I'm not asking for personal credit. I'm just saying, don't do that. Don't do that. Because, you get one. You get one. You get one. Because today is the day of public accountability. That is how we identify and remedy problems. So many things about racism and oppression, like the more devious parts of it, take place behind closed doors and in hushed tones and secret conversations and cryptic emails and, this kind of BS that happens behind the scenes. Well, not everybody is as afraid of calling these things out publicly. I, for one, am going to start doing it, like today. Well, I've been doing it, but I'm going to start doing it a little more. Because there's a progression, right? And I've talked about this. I give people the opportunity to do the right thing. I set these up. They're not traps. They're not traps. These are genuine opportunities to do the right thing. And if you choose to let them pass you by, I just take note of it. Because there will be a time that maybe not the same circumstances, but opportunities will arise again. And if I see you pretend that you've been at the table since the last opportunity, I'm going to ask you why you let that other one go and why you're present for this one. And what the difference is between motivation. Right? Then you might say, well, Chris, that seems a little calculating. Well, I mean, I even remember being a kid and reading the comic books and watching cartoons and being like, man, it is so unfair that the bad guys don't have to play by the rules, and sometimes they win. And the good guys have to play by the rules, and a lot of times they lose. That doesn't seem fair. So it makes sense to me that somewhere in the middle, some of these strategies make sense. That we can still live honorable, dependable, meaningful, trustworthy, and upright, sturdy lives, while maybe employing parts of these strategies that don't blur, test, or bend any of these lines of integrity, moral fortitude, and just good. You know what I'm saying? I look at it as a form of an equalizer, kind of like a baseball bat. If you're 110 pounds and you're being mugged by someone who's 250 pounds, a baseball bat gives you at least a swinger's chance. It's going to level the playing field a little bit. Bit of an equalizer. That's it. That's it. Call it being resourceful, creative. Yeah, whatever you want to call it. Doesn't really matter. But anyway, I did want to say to those of you who were inspired to inform yourselves and your children or families a bit more this last month in Black History Month, I want to say thanks. Because it's important. It means a lot. It means a lot to me. You know? Teach their own, but I think that accurate historical awareness is fundamental. You know? Especially if we don't want to revisit the same places over and over and over again. This is my take on it. Well, if you didn't do it on the way in, think about doing it on the way out. Hit that like, subscribe, post notification bell so you can stay up to date on everything we talk about here on the Bees Like That podcast. Peace, y'all.